Hello, everyone. My name is Tim Grayson, Assembly Member for District 14, and very, very honored to have with us today Congressman Mike Thompson, representing Congressional District 5. Just a wonderful thing to have you, Congressman, with us. Please feel free to speak and join in at any time that you wish. And it is with pleasure that I am able to co-host today with Cal Nonprofits. We have Jan Masaoka and Lucy Salcido Carter with us today from Cal Nonprofits. We'll give a little bit more information on them just in a moment. The purpose of today's town hall is to run a forum where nonprofits can have a voice, highlighting some resources that may not have been widely known, and also to find out how I can better, and Congressman Thompson on a federal level can better serve you and advocate for you. I from a state perspective, and then Congressman Thompson obviously from a federal position. And with that, we will have live questions or an opportunity for them that can be asked using the Q&A box. And Jan, I'll ask that you kind of help me with that, but the chat box is only for technical issues. If you have a question, you want to ask a question, please feel free to use the Q&A box located on your screen. And with that, I would like to introduce our guest that we have here today. We have obviously a partner and co-hosting with Cal Nonprofits is Jan Masaoka. She's the CEO of California Association of Nonprofits. It's a statewide policy alliance of more than 10,000 nonprofits speaking to government, philanthropy, and the public at large. Along with active policy and research work, Cal Nonprofits' current initiatives include flexibility and funding for nonprofits in the COVID-19 crisis, co-sponsoring a bill on donor-advised fund transparency, and also outreach addressing census and voter mobilization. Lucy Salcido Carter is Cal Nonprofits' Public Policy Director. She directs policy initiatives that protect and promote California's nonprofits. Thank you very much. And then we have with us James Head, is President and CEO of the East Bay Community Foundation, which partners with donors, social movements, and the community to eliminate structural barriers, advance racial equity, and transform political, social, and economic outcomes for all who call the East Bay home. Then we have with us Susun Kim, and she is the Executive Director of Family Justice Center Contra Costa. It's an organization serving families affected by domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, and human trafficking. And also with us is Joel Sjostrom. He is the President and CEO of the Food Bank of Contra Costa and Solano, which stores and distributes food directly to low-income people at community sites, makes food available for other nonprofit organizations serving ill, needy, and children. The food bank also works to reduce food waste, feed hungry people, and raise public awareness of issues related to food and to hunger. So with that, there have been a lot of efforts that have come forth, but I can't have this meeting without at least throwing just a few little numbers at you. So as you know, more than ever through the COVID-19 pandemic and its continuation, state and local agencies will depend more and more heavily on critical partnerships with nonprofit organizations. And there are roughly about 92,000 active nonprofits in the state, which makes them the fourth largest employer, employing over 1.2 million Californians and mobilizing 4.8 million volunteers. So having the state heavily rely on these nonprofits, especially, let me give you an example. The government relies on nonprofits to provide 32% of Medi-Cal services, which is huge. And so California Association of Nonprofits, a policy alliance of more than 10,000 nonprofits, put together in a letter signed by 1,200 organizations. And they sent that letter to government leaders, making recommendations to address challenges that they were facing. This is why I and 29 other Assembly members signed a letter authored by Assembly members Rivas and Limon that supports nonprofits and makes the same request of our colleagues and other state leaders. So with that, and a very great push for sector relief, Jan, just a question about the statewide situation. What is the statewide situation for nonprofits and the advocacy that Cal Nonprofits is doing on a state level? How is that going, and what direction?
Thanks. It's really an honor to be here with so many luminaries today. And, I just wanted to say to all the nonprofits on this call today that, it's really, it means a lot when we have elected officials and foundation heads, not only here to speak directly to nonprofits, but also to hear directly from nonprofits. So it's really an unusual and a fantastic opportunity for everybody today. So, there's a big difference among people in the nonprofit community, because of course, nonprofits include healthcare, direct healthcare clinic, which we're seeing on the news every single day, but also includes things like community theaters, environmental organizations, wildlife protection organizations that are a little bit more in the background during this crisis. But I think that what all nonprofits have in common, I think, as you pointed out, is that it's just never been clear that nonprofits are the heartbeat of our communities. And at the same time that nonprofits are on the front lines, we're finding ourselves kind of in the back of the line in certain parts of government relief for nonprofits. And it's kind of interesting that when we asked our folks a couple of weeks ago, what are the obstacles to your serving your communities? And 86% said inflexibility with government contracting. So that's a big deal. And so that's part of our advocacy agenda, and so for example, we're seeing childcare centers that are still open. They have fewer kids per staff person because of distancing issues. We're seeing senior meal sites that can't serve as many people. They're trying to deliver meals, but they can't do as many as before. We're seeing even healthcare clinics, they may not be meeting their quota for TB tests, for example, because they diverted everything to COVID response. So we're seeing people need a level of flexibility in their government funding that has many counties and many state departments have actually worked closely with nonprofits and done a great job. But we really kind of are still looking for a statewide mandate so that there's consistency among counties and among departments. So those are right now the focus of our advocacy activities. But Assemblymember, you stole the whole rest of everything I was going to say. Did somebody sneak you my notes about the number of employees that nonprofits have? 1 in 14 California jobs, and we mobilize more than 1 million volunteers every year, the equivalent of 350,000 full-time jobs and volunteers. So, and the 32% of Medi-Cal. So thanks for saying all those things that I didn't have to.
Repetition's a good thing.
Right, I like that.
So Congressman Jan, did you have anything else that you would like to state?
That's it, thanks.
Congressman Thompson.
Well, Tim, thank you very much. And thank you all for hosting this webinar and for everything you do in our community. And please let all of the people that you work with know how grateful we are for the great job that they do, not only during this pandemic, but 24/7, 365 days every year. We just couldn't pull it off without our incredible nonprofit community. You do so much for so many, and I want you to know that we appreciate it very, very much. Thanks for including me. You know that Congress has been busy trying to churn out the funding that we need to make sure that everything stays afloat. I just got back from Washington a couple of days ago, where we passed the 4th piece of legislation that expanded money by about $485 billion for the programs that are designed to help keep small businesses going and keep their employees employed. That is so very important. The more success we see there, the less work all of you are going to have to do. And today, I'm starting to hear from people who've received information from their banks or their lenders that they got the money that they needed so they can continue to pay for their employees. I think there were a lot of glitches in the program, and there still are a lot. I've told groups in the past that this whole response to the fallout from COVID-19 has been a lot like building an airplane while you're flying it. The federal government has never taken on an endeavor as great as this one. And it's going to take a while for pieces to fall into place. And I'm also hearing from the people who know about the guy that got money that he didn't need, let his employees go anyway. And there's going to be a lot of that as well. So that's why it was so important. We put provisions in the bill to ensure that we have audits and oversight. And that was fiercely fought by the other side of the aisle. But I think it is important because this is taxpayer dollars. These are taxpayer dollars, and they need to go to the people who need those dollars. And it was the express purpose of Congress to make sure that we took care of small businesses and working people. That's very, very important. In this last round, we were able to get more money for healthcare, which is incredibly important because this is a healthcare problem that we're dealing with. And everything else is that's the spillover from the healthcare problem. And the fact that we're still shut down, and I know people are getting tired and they want to go to work and they want to be able to recreate and go to the store. None of this is going to happen until we get a handle on the healthcare side. So it was very important that in each one of these pieces of legislation that we passed, we've tried to address different healthcare needs. The other need that's very obvious is funding for state and local governments. And we've tried twice, we the Democrats have tried twice to ensure that funding would go to the state and local governments. They're at the tip of the spear. They're working on these programs every day. And the fact that the Senate Republicans refuse to go along with providing help is a pretty sad situation. And for the Republican leader of the Senate to say that states should just file bankruptcy, you know, I've got news for him. That is a non-starter. And to say something like that is terribly insensitive and shows a real lack of understanding what that would mean for our country and for our communities. If the states or local governments go bankrupt, that rolls down to the taxpayers. Either employees are laid off or services are drastically reduced. And then your workload is increased markedly. So there's a better way to do it. Letting states and local governments go bankrupt is not the way. We're starting on yet another bill now. We'll continue to work on this. And after that, I think we'll probably move into the stimulus phase, where we're actually trying to invest in our communities for future. And to create jobs and to create better infrastructure and better broadband and better healthcare facilities, and make sure we have jobs and a robust economy. So thanks for all you're doing, and I'm anxious to hear what some of the glitches are that you're experiencing or some of the needs are that you think Congress needs to fill. So thanks for including me.
Very good. Thank you, Congressman Thompson. And we really, really appreciate the good work that you're doing and representing us so well in Washington. With that, Lucy, I think if we could hear from your perspective, how things are going, and just if you could give us some updates on what nonprofits should expect and any advice that you might have for nonprofits that are seeking any type of relief.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Well, as the Congressman said, there was a fourth bill that was passed recently. And in that bill is $310 billion for the Paycheck Protection Plan. I know that probably quite a few of you have applied for that. If you have applied, your application, if you haven't heard anything yet, your application should still be in the queue for this next round of funding. If you have not applied, we really encourage you to do so. It is a way for you to keep your employees on your payroll. And even if you have already laid off employees, you can bring them back on within a certain time period and still be able to qualify. This is a loan forgiveness program. So it's a great opportunity. If you have a lender that you've worked with, you do want to approach your lender and work with them directly. If you don't, I encourage you to go to the Small Business Administration's website, and they have a list of lenders. And you can look for a lender in your area, contact them, keep reaching out until you do have success finding somebody who will process your application for you. With this new legislation that was just signed on Friday, there are additional lenders on board. So there's some smaller banks that are going to be more accessible for nonprofits, including they're going to be credit unions who will be processing these loan applications. So really encourage you to either work with your existing lender or the bank that you have a relationship with, or look for a lender on the SBA website. So those are some things. There is also another relief program for some of the nonprofits who are bigger, who have more than 500 employees. It is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the EIDL. And there's an advance portion of that where if you apply for that loan, it isn't a forgivable loan, but they do have, there is a $10,000 advance portion that is forgivable, that if you apply, you get more immediately than the loan. So that's another option for nonprofits. So those are just a couple of examples of some of the federal relief that's available.
You know, we already had a question about this for the Congressman from Sass Mukherjee, and I'm just going to read it to you. We applied for a PPP loan, but didn't receive any funding. And we're seeing large companies that have applied and received funding. And what is Congress doing to plug the hole in the language of the bill that left the hole open to favor companies as opposed to nonprofits? And I know you spoke a little bit about that, but maybe you could just talk a little bit more, because I think this is a big question, and it's also a question for the EIDL funds too.
Yeah, there were a couple of fixes in the last bill that we passed to try and address that. And there were some folks left out of the program, as you probably know, and we tried to get more people included. We were successful with small farms, family-owned farms who were excluded from the EIDL grant provisions. We're able to put them back in. There's still some nonprofits that can't play, and this has to do with the type of nonprofit that they are, and we were not successful in ensuring inclusion for all of them. The other thing that we did in the bill is had a specific carve out for smaller community type lenders, and we expanded the number of lenders. So now community banks have more access, PayPal, for instance, and kind of non-traditional lenders. But you're absolutely correct. It's a huge problem, and it continues to be a huge problem. It was exacerbated somewhat by one of the larger lending institutions in our area that was a bad player during the recession, and they had sanctions put on them. So when they were under a cap as to how much they could lend. So when the initial PPP program opened, they are alleged to have pushed these loans out to their prime customers at the expense of small businesses. And then they hit their cap and they said, well, we can't do any of the small guys. Well, we went to work, and we had that cap modified so they could continue to lend to small people. But I think one of the inherent problems in the program is it incentivizes lenders to prioritize their better customers. They can make more money lending big amounts of money. And then also, I'm assuming that a lot of these guys were looking at what happens down the road. So they were taking care of the more, the quote unquote better customers, the richer folks. And they prioritized their loans knowing that that would come back to benefit them down the road. And it's terrible. When you pick up the paper and you see 4 or 5 restaurants that we all know, owned and operated by people that we all know, and people who are truly small businesses shutting their doors forever. And the next article is Ruth Chris Steakhouse gets $10 million. and they're a well-capitalized entity. It's just crazy. I have one friend who applied to 4 lenders in my hometown, and she got nowhere. So she finally got a loan, a PPP loan, from a lender in North Dakota because she knew somebody who called in a favor. And this program isn't supposed to operate that. This isn't you get a loan because you know a guy who knows a guy. This is because you have employees that we need to keep money in their pockets, and we want to see your small business be successful. And as I said, we weren't able to close all of the loopholes. It's a it's negotiation. We all have different priorities, and the House Democrats came to the table with our priorities, and we had to deal with this administration and the Mitch McConnell Republicans in the Senate. We got some of what we wanted. We didn't get everything. But it is important to remember that these audit provisions are in there, and in the end, this all needs to come out in the wash.
Thank you. We have a question from a nonprofit in Solano County wanting to know how they can find a lender in Solano County. I would really encourage you again to go to the SBA website, and on that website you can put in your zip code, and all of the lenders who are processing the PPP applications will appear on your screen, and you can start reaching out to them.
They need to go fast though, because this $485 billion, it's expected to run out but somewhere between 48 hours and a week. So you need to be quick and get your foot in the door. And if you don't get funded in this round, I'm sure there's going to be another round. So, but you need to get it teed up.
Absolutely. So the applications opened up yesterday, and the application process is pretty easy. You do need to have some payroll information ready to complete the application form, but it's a short form.
Very good. And so what we'll do is, as more questions come in, we can go back to questions, but I do want to move on to James Head. And so what kind of funding does your organization have, and how what's the process like? How much time did it take, and what was the amount of, or if you can divulge or whatever, the amount of funding, and how does the whole process work?
Sure. Thank you, Assemblymember Grayson, and I want to commend both you and Cal Nonprofit for this town hall meeting. I think it's really important for us as we go through this experience that we're going through, which I think for many of us is a once in a lifetime experience, that we understand the needs of the nonprofit sector and how they're doing in this experience. On the philanthropic level, we at East Bay Community Foundation, working with our nonprofit partners at the beginning of this pandemic, identified that there was a real need to provide direct assistance to individuals and families who were most vulnerable. So we set up a fund, a rapid response fund, that actually is providing direct financial assistance through either cash or checks to through nonprofit organizations and then to individuals and families in Alameda and Contra Costa County. And we've done really well so far. We have a goal of raising $5 million for the fund. We have raised a little bit over $3 million at this point in time. We've actually put into the community almost $2 million of that $3 million. And so donors have been very generous in joining us in that effort. When we started this effort, we had actually already made grants related to discretionary grants and not donor advised grants to organizations in the community, nonprofits in the community. And so we had to raise additional resources to meet the need that we were hearing, and have been, I think on the road to being able to do that. Our board of directors at the foundation actually made a decision to pull $1 million out of the endowment of the foundation as a special need to put into the community. So that has gone into this particular fund. And so we're trying as a community foundation to really meet the needs of the organizations that are doing this work at the community level. The program that we have is not one that is open to other grantees. We're using existing grantees who have been doing this work and have credibility and know the communities in Alameda and Contra Costa County. And we've put about, I think, 800,000 to 900,000 of the 1.7 million that we put out so far in Contra Costa County. So we're very proud of that. But the need is great. And so what I would say is that as a foundation, for those organizations who are participating in the town hall, there is information at the League of California Community Foundations website. It's www.lccf.org, where you can find out actually what community foundations have created response funds and where they are located, and then can inquire with them as to the availability of resources for the work that you're doing.
Very good. And we just heard from James Head, who is CEO and president of East Bay Community Foundation. Please feel free to reach out to them. I'm sure that they will be able to help. And this is for both Jan and Lucy, just from me, based on a past question that I just saw about funding. A lot of nonprofits right now are really concerned about funding and sustaining and moving forward. Congressman Thompson did a great job of explaining about the PPP funding and SBA on the state level with California and where it's at. I know the governor put some money, I believe to the tune of about 50 million into helping fund businesses and nonprofits through the Office of Business and Economic Development. Are you aware of how that's going, or how a nonprofit could pursue money on a state level? You're on mute. There you go.
This is my New Year's resolution: never be on mute when you're not supposed to be. So our understanding of a lot of that money is going to go through the counties, and I would really encourage nonprofits to work with their locally, to work with folks and speak to their members of the Board of Supervisors, as well as to their county level emergency services, and in particular health departments. One of the things we have really appreciated about the governor is that they are, for the most part, treating nonprofits as similar in this, getting the same kinds of benefits as for-profits, because of course nonprofits are employers, we're property owners, we're commercial tenants, and so that those kinds of benefits that are coming from the state, for example, for employers, are applying equally to nonprofit employers as well as for-profit employers. So that's something we've been very happy about.
All right.
We are also continuing to advocate to be sure that any emergency funding does include nonprofits, because we know that many nonprofits are providing essential services. So we want to make sure that that funding is getting to nonprofits who are providing those services.
Fantastic. And I think you brought up a really good point, and that is sometimes we become so focused on what the federal government's providing or where we could go for the state, we actually miss out on some of the really good resources that are local and coming through our counties. So let's definitely make sure you're in the mix there as far as the counties. I do want to go to a couple of nonprofit leaders that we have in our community. And let me reintroduce Susun Kim, who's the Executive Director of the Family Justice Center, Contra Costa, as well as Joel Sjostrom, President and CEO of the Food Bank of Contra Costa and Solano. Just to hear your perspective about the situation on the ground, the front line, what observations you have, unique concerns you might have, to hear from you directly as far as a nonprofit, something that we could take away, the Congressman and I could take away, and Cal nonprofits, and advocate even in a stronger way for you. So what's your perspective? What have you been experiencing? Some of the challenges, anything good that might happen? You might want to slip that in there too. So Susun, go first.
Okay, sure. I want to highlight the needs of our clients who are victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, elder abuse, and human trafficking in this COVID-19 time. This is week 7 of shelter in place. And what we learned from week 1 is that most of our clients who are low wage workers lost their jobs just the first week. And this is not just health crisis, it's an economic crisis. We also learned that undocumented residents have suffered most because they don't qualify for unemployment benefits or public benefits. They don't get stimulus checks. So they really don't have any income. We also have learned that domestic violence shelters in the Bay Area are not taking new clients for health reasons. But there's this whole other side of safety. Where do they go? They are placed in hotels, but they are isolated. And it's really difficult to create that sense of community when you are isolated in hotel rooms. That's not ideal. And 4, domestic violence calls to law enforcement agencies during the first month were actually down because people are hunkered down trying to figure out how to survive in abusive situations. But now, in the last 2 weeks, the numbers are ticking up. And the cases that we are seeing actually involve more violent physical injuries. So we are worried about domestic violence. As far as child abuse, we are actually seeing less child abuse reports made to CPS, Child Protective Services, as well as less elder abuse reports made to APS, Adult Protective Services. So we are very worried about child abuse and elder abuse that are happening because our mandated reporters like teachers and the healthcare workers are not all in communication and in contact with abuse victims. So we are very much worried about that. We also see a lot of clients who stay in abusive relationship and abusive situation because they have no jobs, they have no way to really support themselves because this is COVID-19 time. So we are worried about the abuse going on. There are a lot of people also afraid of losing custody of their children because they cannot really adequately support their children because children are being homeschooled, and our clients who are immigrants and low income, undocumented find it really difficult to support their children. Finally, I want to highlight one of our cases involving a healthcare worker who couldn't really exercise her custody right because she's working in an emergency room in our community, and the father of her children did not want to return her children to her, and law enforcement didn't really want to enforce the custody order. So that was really concern for our healthcare workers. So I know it's been kind of heavy, but we do have some good news that I want to share with you, and I want to end my portion with some good news. That from the beginning, we were able to put emergency fund together to give out gift cards and food money to our clients. And most recently, we got a grant from East Bay Community Foundation. It was like the simplest application process. I actually just emailed them, and we got a check. And with their check, we could actually give $500 checks to our clients this week. So we're actually moving money faster than Governor Newsom. I'm proud of that. Also, we are getting a lot of support from our community, like small checks and big checks coming in because people realize that our clients are really in need. Finally, I want to also talk about a lot of different collaboration opportunities that have come up. We are working cross sectors with a lot of departments and different providers to work together. So I think we are definitely collaborating more through Zoom. So that's my highlight. Thank you.
And Joel?
Well, first, on behalf of the Food Bank, I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in the discussions here today. I am so pleased and proud to be leading the Food Bank of Contra, Costa, and Solano. Has been serving the community for some 40 plus years. Just a couple of our stats, if you will. We have distributed over 30 million pounds of food in the last year. We serve 178,000 clients every month in our 2 counties. And also, we actually, half of that food is fresh produce, which I think is really a good thing for our clients, more nutritious. Also takes a lot of volunteers, by the way, to help us sort through all of that. But for our food bank, we really have seen a significant increase in demand at our distribution sites. We're seeing 30 to 50% increases at many of our sites. Some have actually even doubled. And I think I know we've seen accelerated use in literally the last week and the last 10 days. So we're seeing a significant increase in the need for food from our neighbors in need. We've always been concerned about our low-income seniors. And they're sometimes logistically challenged as well and have difficulty getting to our distribution sites. And I think now under COVID, they're even afraid to go out as a vulnerable population to get some of the distribution sites. We've been concerned about our children with the schools closed, the children and their families. And we've partnered with 7 different school districts to add supplemental foods into the distributions that they're making in their school districts. And now I think most recently, I think everyone's concerned. I'm really concerned about the unemployment numbers. And I think Susan mentioned that as well, is that, you know, we have so many people, this 26 million plus now unemployment applications. And many of those people we know are living right on the fence, paycheck to paycheck. And we are seeing many new faces at our distribution sites that I really believe is part of this unemployment piece, that they've never had food insecurity before. As far as, you know, supply chain has been one of our biggest challenge. It has really slowed in the supply chain. We know the run on retail, and what that caused is kind of the backlog on food and the slowing of that supply chain. It is getting a little bit better. We do have a new opportunity literally just this week, and this morning I was on a call with the USDA on the new COVID Family Assistance Program, CFAP, which is good because we were in need of a new acronym. But the CFAP, I think this really could turn out to be quick movement by the government and the USDA to get needed food out into our communities. And so I look forward to seeing that hopefully continue to move quickly and add to our inventories of food. You know, our ultimate lead is to have more funds for more food so that we can get this out to the community and the significant increase that we're seeing in demand from our neighbors in need.
Very good. Thank you for that, that report. And by the way, thank you to the Food Bank for all that you do, and then also to the Family Justice Center. Susan, you and I've worked together quite a bit, and thank you for all the lives that are saved through your organization and the good work that you do. I know there are questions, and I would turn to Jan and Lucy, if you don't mind. Would you moderate some of the questions? And of course, we know that we're not going to be able to answer all the questions. And I know that people want to address Congressman Thompson and I about a lot of their issues. And we will give our contact information at the end, at the closing. But just, if you don't mind, moderate and kind of help us through some questions.
Yeah, so one of the things is to combine a couple of questions into one, you know, because this isn't something that's going to be just over, right? And so we know that there's going to, we're kind of wondering what kind of funding, particularly from the state, is going to be available, given the fact that there's likely to be a lot of budget issues with decreased income tax being paid, for example, and kind of where is that going? And kind of a comparable question is related to kind of looking at the food chain. So for example, we know that food chains have been somewhat disrupted during this, and sort of nonprofits are really the core of the services supply chain. So kind of looking at the budget coming up and looking at protecting these important supply chains to the public, how is the state government approaching those?
So very good question. And talking about uncertainty, I know that the governor is coming out with a May revise on May the 14th. We're actually hearing that there will also be an additional revise that is a bit reactionary that will come out in August. And that is due to the fact, as you already mentioned, the delay in the income tax moving from April to July. So the uncertainty there, the sales tax revenue that has dropped dramatically, especially for local governments, as Congressman Thompson already mentioned about the need of local governments and what they're experiencing right now with lack of revenue. So having said that, you said it eloquently when you talked about the food chain. And obviously there are some things that are going to be constant, that have to be funded, that will need to be funded. I think right now, especially for nonprofits and those of a smaller business type nature, it is going to be imperative that you make your voice as large and loud as you can. And one way of doing that, and I think this is the most appropriate time to say this, is to really join your voices with the many other in the sector, in the nonprofit sector, and that is by joining an association, by becoming a part of Cal Nonprofits or others, that you can magnify your voice, because it's really going to come down to how strong of an effort and how loud that voice is when this budget revise comes out. Then when we come back into session and begin to negotiate in June and vote on this final budget, that we know is only the start of what we suspect to be cuts, even into the next year's budget. So I know that's not a direct, here's the number of dollars answer, but in principle, there's going to be cuts. It's going to be a heavy lift for anybody to sustain the kind of funding that they've been getting in the past couple of years. So that's the best answer I can give right now as far as budget on a state level.
May I add something?
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Yes.
I just want to make sure, I think everybody knows this, but I just want to reiterate, you know, we're not going to wake up one morning soon and say it's over and somehow flip a switch and everything goes back to normal. Even the starting up of businesses and getting back to normal is going to take a while. Everything is going to be phased in. Hopefully everybody will recognize it needs to be driven by science. Politicians shouldn't be making these decisions. This is a, you know, healthcare decision. Health issues need to drive this. So it's going to be slow. All the economic models show that we're going to be hurting for a while. This is the worst thing from an economic perspective that we've ever faced since the Great Depression. And it's going to take a while to get back going. Now, use everything that you have at your disposal to make sure that Congress and the administration know that Congress and administration really need to step up. We know how to fix these things. We just need to do it. And, you know, I am so tired of every time there's a real problem where people need help, some of my colleagues start crying for some sort of better fiscal responsibility. And I'm a fiscally responsible person. And when the time comes to be fiscally responsible, I'll be there with the best of them. But this is not the time. We need to use every resource of the federal government to make sure that people are protected. And we're really going to need your voice in that fight. So there's a lot that we can do to help. We just need to make sure that we have the votes in Washington to make that happen.
Well said, Congressman.
Well said. You know, I have a question for James Head, East Bay Community Foundation. You know, I just wanted to say on behalf of Cal Nonprofits, some of the things we've really appreciated about East Bay Community Foundation is really, in all of these COVID relief efforts, really drawing attention to the issues of inequity and disparities that are both revealed by the COVID crisis and also that are exacerbated by the COVID crisis. And so for nonprofits that are looking at these issues, you know, what work can we be doing now to make sure that these issues continue to stay in the forefront and more work is being done to correct them in the future?
Thank you, Jen. A great question. Part of what I think we have the opportunity to do as we go forward is to actually look at the inequities that have existed in the system before now and take measured and strategic steps to address those in putting together what we think should be the future as we go forward. I'm one who thinks that we're not going to return, or at least I don't want us to return to normal. I think that we should look at this as a new beginning, the opportunity to really shape the issues and look at the structural barriers that have prohibited people from being successful, and utilize that as part of the strategies of what we think we should be doing. In that regard, I think that we don't sometimes take enough time to actually examine the experience that we go through and what were the pluses and minuses of that experience. And I would really be open to the idea of helping, especially philanthropy and the nonprofit sector, but also with the public sector, helping us in the business sector to begin to think about what worked during this time that we were sort of in this place, and what didn't work, and really sort of building on those things that worked and looking at how to address the things that were not particularly helpful. And one of those has been the idea, and I think Congressman Thompson was alluding to this, of the sector being much more vocal and active in policies and activities that are necessary. We assisted a number of organizations in Contra Costa County in going to the county supervisors around the issue of rent moratorium, which is vital and critical to people's ability to sustain themselves, at least in this short period of time. And they were successful. They were successful in getting the county supervisors to support the fact that a moratorium on rent needed to happen in order for individuals and families to have the disposable income to just survive, to be able to get food and other necessities. So, I think that there's lots to be learned from what we've gone through. I think that it does also chart for us a path for the future, and we should take advantage of that as best we can. And I know it's hard to do that while you're in the moment, but I think it's necessary and essential to our future.
Thank you. We have another question for the Congressman. In thinking about how things are going so far, we have a number of questions from nonprofits about the federal relief, and that it doesn't include, the PPP, for example, doesn't include all types of nonprofits. It focuses on the 501c3s and 501c19s and smaller nonprofits and small businesses, which is great. But what about the larger nonprofits and some of the nonprofits that fit in other categories? Do you see that there's some opportunities for advocacy at the federal level to broaden some of the relief?
Well, as I said earlier, on COVID-3 and COVID-4, the last two pieces of legislation that we passed, those were in the Democrats' proposal, but those were rejected over on the Senate side. I don't know if it was by McConnell or by Mnuchin, but they were just non-starters on that side. We continue to push for them, and we will continue to push for them, and hopefully we'll be able to get some relief to those particular organizations in this next piece of legislation. I know that's not the best answer, but it's the reality of it all.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. And Assemblymember, so in terms of, we understand that there are more than 100 executive orders stacked up on the governor's desk right now as proposals. And, what can nonprofits be doing now to support you and the efforts of other members of the legislature in getting nonprofit concerns, which are cost neutral, right? The letter that you mentioned, more than 1,200 nonprofits have signed, and a number of legislators as well, those are cost neutral, revenue neutral proposals, and yet we're not seeming to get the kind of movement on a statewide level that we would have hoped. What can nonprofits be doing to support efforts to get there?
Definitely communication. Communicate with my office, communicate with through the associations, through Cal Nonprofits, and through other associations. But definitely communicate, and to also do something that Congressman Thompson brought up as well, and that is, this is not something that's going to be fixed or over with a light switch. So not only thinking about what the needs, pressures, and challenges are right now, communicate those, of course, but also to look forward and to, in your forecasting for your nonprofit, what challenges you see that may be coming at you already, and communicate those as well. We are scheduled to go back as a legislative body on May the 4th, and committee hearings will be heard throughout the month of May. This would be a fantastic time to reach out. Go to my website at www.8014.asmdc.org. Give me an email, make a phone call to either of my district offices or my capital office. whatever you do, don't feel like your problem's too small or your problem's too big and impossible that you can't communicate it. Definitely communicate. We welcome the communication and we will advocate the best we can for you.
Thanks very much. Question for Susun and for Joel. You know, what kinds of we know not outside of government contracting work, a lot of nonprofits have had their fundraisers canceled, their opening nights canceled, all kinds of things. And what are you seeing that's maybe effective right now for nonprofits that are on the individual and foundation fundraising fronts? What's working for you, I guess, or what's not working for you?
I can start on this, is that I'm really, really pleased and proud of how our community has stood up in individual fundraising, foundations, and really on the volunteer front, where I said we're so dependent on our volunteers. We originally saw about a 30% drop in our volunteer group. A lot of our regular volunteers are that vulnerable age group, and our community has stepped up and filled in almost every shift we put in on our website, which has just been amazing. On the dollar fundraising, you know, we've had a very good response, but the concern is that this is going to go on for a long time. We may see a spike right now in use, although I think that's going to be there in demand, but we're probably seeing a spike in donations as well. What happens in June, July, August, September, because I think are a long way from coming out of this. And this is our concern, so that we, of course, ensure that we're sustainable through time and being good stewards in that regard, but meeting as much of the possible need as we can out there in safely distributing food to our community. So I think that's really the challenge on the longer term.
I'm not sure that I have much more to add, other than to say that we too have really enjoyed a lot of community support. We've had neighbors who brought masks to us, like these homemade masks, and we've had yoga practitioners who want to do fundraisers for us through Zoom yoga. So a lot of different creative ideas have come forward from our community. But like Joel, you know, we are worried about later this year and next year with the state and county funding sources also being impacted heavily by this economic crisis. One other thing I want to note is that we have our annual fundraiser event, and this year we are going to have this event at the Black Hawk Museum with 600 people. So that's not going to happen. So we are talking about virtual events and what it means to do our events virtually and raise sufficient funding sources.
Okay, we're just about running out of time, and I'm closing.
Jen, if I may, can I just ask you to speak about Cal Nonprofit's role, how to join the association, and what is coming up, and other resources that it has for memberships?
Thanks so much for asking. Do I owe you $10 for asking that or something?
No, it really is good. It really is a good work that you do.
You know, well, I think a lot of you saw our economic impact report of nonprofits, causes count, and later tomorrow we're going to send everybody on this webinar a county profile. So a profile that shows some of the basic information about your county and the nonprofit impacts that are in those particular counties. So just as one example, in Contra, Costa, there are 2,800 nonprofits, but it's interesting that let's see, oh no, I've lost track of this. But actually two-thirds of them are all volunteer organizations. So it's kind of says something about the power of volunteerism in addition to volunteering for staffed organizations. And Contra Costa nonprofits actually employ 28,000 staff, which makes them an important part of the workforce in many different ways. So we will be sending that to you later, and along with an opportunity to join at a discounted rate. I do want to say that I want to say to all the nonprofits, you know, whatever field you're in, join the association of that field. So for example, you know, if you're a museum, you should be joining the California Association of Museums, right? If you're a family resource center or domestic violence, because all of these places are where you're going to hear the absolute up-to-date, you know, what's at the very most important level, who needs to be called, on what day, about which bill, and it's important to stay in touch with that. And our particular niche is looking at the issues that we sometimes call high impact, low profile, because they're often regulatory in nature and funding in nature, as opposed to some of the things that are specific field by field. So we hope you'll join Cal Nonprofits as well. But one of the things that I think both the Congressman and the Assemblyman have pointed out is, is the importance of voting. And indirectly, and the importance of census. So the fact is that how much money California gets is a lot dependent on the census, and how well nonprofits and the communities that we represent are served depends a lot on who our elected officials are. So I want to encourage all of us, even if we don't think about ourselves as voter mobilization organizations, we need to become that, and we need to become census mobilizers as well. And it just really struck me how lucky that we are in California to have representatives that really understand the role that nonprofits have in serving our communities. And and the fact that you guys are even on this town hall today is a reflection of that. So everybody, fill out your census form and vote, and get everybody and your clients and your patrons and your donors and your volunteers, they all need to do that too.
Jan, thank you. And Susun, thank you for your background. That's awesome. Very, very good. Congressman Thompson, you have any closing remarks next few seconds?
Well, I'll just say once again, thank you to all of you and all of your team members who do such a great job to help our community. And know that you can call, I don't want to speak for Tim, but I will. You can call us anytime. You don't have to wait for a webinar. If you need something, let us know. Thank you all. And Tim, thank you. And I have one question for you, Tim. Is that a background, or are you sitting on the dock of the bay?
In my spirit, in my mind, I'm at the dock of the bay. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you all.
And to say thank you to both Jan and Lucy from Cal Nonprofits for your great work. James Head, thank you very much. Susun Kim and Joel Sjostrom, thank you very much. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you very much.